My brother is dead, and here you are thinking about such things. I can't believe it. I can't stay with you anymore. My husband Jaden shouted at me during the funeral, but I knew he was just hiding his true intentions. His body carried the scent of a perfume, the same one his late brother's wife always wore. I want a divorce. Divorce me immediately. Okay, let's get a divorce then. For a moment, my husband was stunned. He couldn't believe I accepted so easily, but then he started to grin, as if he thought he could now be happy with his late brother's wife, free from me. But it won't be that easy. I whispered those words so quietly that no one could hear. My name is Stella. I live with my husband Jaden and my mother-in-law. My parents have already passed away, and I have no siblings. My mother-in-law welcomed me warmly as if I were her own daughter. I was overjoyed to finally have a family after spending so much time alone and depressed, with no one to lean on. I loved and deeply appreciated her. Jaden had a younger brother, Bobby, who was married to a young woman. They lived near my in-laws. When I joined the family, Bobby welcomed me with the same kindness as my mother-in-law. We lived close to each other, and our families often traveled together. I was happy with my new life, but those happy days were coming to an end. One day, Bobby was rushed to the emergency room. I left work immediately and hurried to the hospital. In the hospital room, I found my mother-in-law crying. I sat by her side and asked about his condition. He seemed to have passed the critical stage, but the doctor said it was still too early to tell. I held my mother-in-law's shoulder, comforting her as best I could. Still, there was no sign of my husband or Bobby's wife. I wished they would arrive soon because my mother-in-law needed them too. Jaden was on an urgent business trip but was on his way to the hospital now. My mother-in-law was distressed, unable to reach Bobby's wife, Karen. I wondered if there was any way to contact her, but there was nothing we could do but wait. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Finally, we heard footsteps approaching the hospital room. It was my husband, and with him was Karen. He explained that he had brought her to the hospital. I was relieved that they were finally there. But then, I felt something off. My husband, he smelled different. Was he wearing perfume? The scent was familiar. I looked over and saw Karen holding my brother-in-law's hand. A few days later, Bobby passed away. The wake and the funeral went by without incident, and things settled down somewhat. I noticed that Jaden was taking care of Karen with unusual attentiveness. Of course, she must be in more pain than anyone, having lost her husband, and surely she needed emotional support. But they seemed closer than necessary, even enjoying each other's company. I began to doubt their relationship, feeling guilty for my suspicions. Maybe I was just looking at things the wrong way. After all, it was better for Karen to be happy than to be depressed. So I tried to push those thoughts aside. But perhaps I should have paid more attention. Not long after, Jaden dropped a shocking revelation on me. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. I was folding laundry at the time. I stopped and turned to face him, sensing the weight of what he was about to say. "Ever since my brother passed away, there's been something missing in me," he confessed. "It's a wound that won't heal, not even when I'm with you." I was shocked, to be honest. I thought I was taking care of my husband in my own way, trying to offer him the same support that my mother-in-law had given me. But it clearly wasn't enough. It hadn't been long since my brother-in-law passed away, and I was trying hard not to show how upset I was. I nodded along, listening to the rest of what Jaden had to say. "But I've met someone who fills that emptiness," he continued. My heart sank as I braced myself for his next words. "It's Karen, Bobby's wife. She's grieving too, and we found comfort in each other. There are some voids that only those who've lost someone can fill." His words were like a dagger to my heart. I tried to deny what I was hearing, to push away the rising panic. "The love of my life is Karen," he confessed. "We just met in the wrong order. Please divorce me." My head spun. What the hell was he talking about? My mind raced back to the hospital, to the moment they had shown up together, both smelling of the same perfume. "Karen is my destiny," he insisted. "I know that now." I felt a wave of disbelief and betrayal wash over me. "You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "What do you mean?" he snapped. "Are you accusing me of having an affair?" I was taken aback by the coldness in his voice, but I couldn't stop myself from explaining what had been gnawing at me: the perfume, the way he took care of her, how close they had become. The more I talked, the more I laid out the evidence of his infidelity. Jaden's mood darkened, his anger flaring. "We're still grieving, and you're talking about this? I can't believe it. I can't be with you anymore." With those words, he walked away. As I watched his back disappear, the full weight of what he had said crashed down on me. He had just told me that I was not his life partner, and the shock and pain hit me all at once. All I could do was cry. The pain was unbearable, and I felt like I had to do something, anything to keep myself from falling apart. I reached for Bobby's belongings. He had loved photography and kept a meticulously organized album of his photos. I opened it, flipping through pictures of us on trips together. The happiness captured in those photos felt like a distant memory, and I feared I had destroyed any chance of reclaiming it. As I turned the pages, something slipped out from between them, an envelope. A few days later, Jaden and I finalized our divorce. When my mother-in-law learned about Jaden's intentions and the divorce, she broke down in tears and apologized to me. "I'm so sorry for my foolish son," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I know you'll find happiness, Stella. Even though we're no longer in the same family, you and I will always be family. If you ever need anything, please call me immediately." She had always been good to me, and she had nothing to apologize for. It broke my heart to see such a kind woman cry, and leaving her behind was the hardest part of all. After I moved out of my parents-in-law's house and started living alone, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness. It wasn't the first time I'd lived alone. I had done so before marriage, but this time, the solitude felt almost unbearable. However, that loneliness didn't last long. 2 months later, I received a call from my mother-in-law. She told me that my ex-husband and Karen had moved out, leaving her alone in a house that now felt too big and empty. She was thinking about selling the house and starting a new life on her own. But moving away would mean leaving behind the neighborhood and the friends she could rely on. Her voice was tinged with sadness when she asked if it would be all right for her to move closer to me. Hearing the loneliness in her voice, I suggested something I expected. We should move in together. At first she was hesitant, not wanting to impose. But I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone, and eventually I convinced her. In the end, we built an apartment and moved in together. Since then, we've grown closer, more like mother and daughter than ever before. Our days together were peaceful and life seemed to be moving forward. But then, one day, I received a call from an unknown number. To my surprise, it was Karen. "What do you want after all these years?" I asked, bracing myself. "How come the house is gone? And what's this about you being adopted?" She shouted, her voice sharp and accusing. I felt my heart skip a beat at her sudden outburst. The house my mother-in-law sold had been replaced by a new building, which was to be expected. As for the adoption, it was something my mother-in-law had suggested when we decided to move in together. She wanted us to be a real family, and I had agreed. But Karen's tone made it clear that she was upset, perhaps even resentful. I began to suspect that she had been after Bobby's inheritance all along. The inheritance that my mother-in-law had now passed on to me. The thought that Karen might have married my ex-husband for Bobby's money crossed my mind more than once. Realizing the time had come to address this, I spoke firmly. "You have no right to tell me what to do. We're not family anymore, and you should be grateful I didn't ask for alimony for the affair, but if you push me, I will." Karen seemed taken aback, but quickly recovered, her voice laced with venom. "You accused Jaden of adultery even before we were together. You made him want to leave you. You should be ashamed of yourself." I scoffed, her response so predictable that I couldn't help but counter it with a touch of sarcasm. "What if I told you I have proof?" Silence fell on the other end of the line. I had found the letter, the one that had slipped out of Bobby's photo album the day my husband left me. The letter was filled with Bobby's bitterness and pain. "The doctor told me I don't have much time," the letter began. "By the time you read this, I won't be around anymore. This letter contains hidden evidence of my wife's affair with Jaden. If Jaden or Karen finds this letter, they can destroy it all, and I will have failed miserably. But if you, Stella, find this letter, let my wife and my brother be punished for what they deserve." The silence on the phone was deafening. I knew Karen had no comeback for this. My brother-in-law's letter also revealed his deep feelings about his wife, Karen. He wrote about how, after we got married, Karen quit her job and seemed to think it was his responsibility to make her happy. She just sat around the house, doing nothing. When he suggested they should help each other out more, she got upset. There were days when she shut him out completely, especially when she felt he wasn't earning enough money. He confessed that it was hard for him to accept how much she had changed. He tried to work harder, hoping that if he made her life easier, she might return to the person he once loved. But in the end, he realized that the woman she had become was her true self all along. He felt ashamed that he hadn't seen it sooner. If Jaden and Karen hadn't gotten involved, he wrote, I wouldn't have tried to make things worse. But I can't let her misdeeds go any further. I have to take action for my late brother-in-law. I'll destroy them both. Bobby had seen through Karen a long time ago and had gathered all the evidence. Now it was up to me to carry out his wish. I could almost hear Karen shaking on the other end of the line, trying to sound strong, but her voice trembled. There's no way you can ask for alimony now that we're married, she spat. That's a bluff. You're just trying to scare me, but it's not going to work. I'll sue you for blackmail. Be my guest, I replied calmly. But remember, paying for a lawyer costs a lot. You might think it's a waste of money, but I'm prepared. You seem to have studied the division of property, but you overlooked adultery. So knave. You thought Bobby didn't know anything, didn't you? Karen hung up violently. Later, I filed a claim for alimony against my ex-husband and his new wife through a lawyer. After a while, my ex-husband reached out to my mother. Apparently, he wanted to leave Karen and live with her again. Karen's true nature, combined with her anger over the alimony charges, had made her unbearable to live with. My ex-husband's voice on the phone was so tired, it was hard to believe they were newlyweds. Like my late brother-in-law, he had failed to see Karen's true nature. It's amazing what blood can do to you, my mother remarked as she sat next to me, listening to the phone conversation. Come on, Mom, I didn't know she was like that, my ex-husband pleaded. I can't live with her anymore. I just want to be with you and Stella again. What the hell? My mother snapped. You're the one who said she was the one and left Stella. I won't allow a man who hurt my daughter to live with us. If you're really sorry, you'll first pay the alimony. If you do anything to me or Stella, I'll call the police. No, Mom, please, he begged, his voice pathetic. Despite his pleas, my mother couldn't forgive him. But she did offer him a final act of mercy. If you really can't pay the alimony, she said, I'll pay it for you. But in exchange, you must forego all inheritance after my death and never appear in front of us again. He had no choice but to accept. We never heard from him or Karen again. My mother and I continued to live together, finding joy in each other's company. We celebrated our happy moments, comforted each other in our sadness, and even strengthened our bond by working through our disagreements. Bobby, I thought to myself, I've avenged you. Although Bobby and I are no longer connected by blood, the bond I share with my mother is stronger than ever. We'll continue to live happily